If you feel like something is watching your life right now, don't ignore it, because when God starts moving in you, the enemy notices immediately. And what you're feeling right now, it's not random. That tension, that pressure, that strange sense that something has shifted in your life, it didn't start when things got hard. It started the moment God began to move in you. Because the truth most people don't realize is this: the enemy doesn't react to weakness. He reacts to purpose. He reacts when something inside of you begins to change, when your thinking shifts, when your spirit starts waking up, when God begins doing something deeper than you can even explain. That's when the attention starts. That's when things begin to feel different. Suddenly, you face resistance you didn't have before. You feel attacked in ways that don't make sense. You feel like something is trying to distract you, drain you, or pull you back. And you start asking yourself, why now? Why is this happening? Why does it feel like everything is pushing against me? But what if the pressure you're feeling is actually proof that something powerful is happening in your life? What if the reason it feels like you're being watched is because heaven has already marked you, and the moment God's hand touched your life, everything in the unseen realm took notice? So before you dismiss what you're feeling, before you go back to what's comfortable, before you convince yourself it's just your imagination, you need to understand what's really happening, because this is the moment most people miss. And if you don't see it clearly, you might walk away from the very thing God is trying to do in your life right now. But if you do understand it, it will change the way you see everything. And it starts with this. Number one, when God draws you closer, heaven marks you differently. The first thing you need to understand is this: when God starts drawing you closer, something begins to change inside you. It may not happen loudly. It may not happen in a way others can see, but you feel it. Your thoughts begin to shift. Your desires begin to change. Things that once felt normal no longer satisfy you the same way. And deep down, you know something is different. That is not random. That is what happens when God begins moving in your life. The Bible says, "Draw near to God, and He will draw near to you." And when that begins to happen, your life is no longer spiritually ordinary. Heaven marks you differently. You are no longer just drifting through life. You are no longer asleep in your spirit. You are no longer as easy to pull away as you once were. And that matters more than most people realize. Because when God starts waking you up, the unseen realm notices it. This is what happened with David. Before he wore the crown, God had already chosen him. Before people recognized him, heaven had already marked him. He looked hidden. He looked overlooked. He looked ordinary. But in the spirit, he was set apart. And that is how God often works. He starts in the hidden place. He changes you before he reveals you. He works in your heart before he changes your position. That is why a season can feel strange even when nothing around you has changed yet, because God is doing the deeper work first. He is changing your heart. He is changing your focus. He is changing your direction. And once that begins, resistance often follows. Why? Because when you move closer to God, you also begin moving away from the things that once had influence over you. Old habits, old mindsets, old distractions, old attachments. And the enemy notices when he is losing access. He notices when your hunger for God becomes real. He notices when your spirit starts waking up. He notices when your identity begins to shift. That is why things can suddenly feel heavier. Not because God has left you, but because your life is no longer going unnoticed. The enemy is not reacting to who you were. He is reacting to who you are becoming. So if this season feels different, if the pressure has increased, if the battle has become more intense, do not be too quick to think something is wrong. It may be the clearest sign that something in you is changing for the better. Because when God draws you closer, heaven marks your life. And once that happens, everything around you begins to respond. And that leads to the next truth. Number two, the enemy watches what God is building in you. The enemy does not wait until everything is visible. He starts reacting while God is still building. That is why some battles begin before you even understand what God is doing in your life. You may not see it fully yet. You may not feel strong yet. You may not have the words for it yet. But the enemy can sense when something is growing in you. He sees movement. He sees hunger. He sees spiritual change. And when he sees that God is building something in you, He reacts. This is what we see in the story of Job. Before the pain became visible, Job was already known in the unseen realm. The enemy was aware of him. Why? Because Job's life carried faithfulness, integrity, spiritual weight. That tells us something important. The pressure you are feeling may not be random. It may be connected to what God is building in you right now. Because the enemy does not waste attention on people who stay completely asleep, distracted, and disconnected from purpose. He reacts when growth begins. He reacts when your thinking starts changing. He reacts when your prayer life becomes real. He reacts when your spirit starts aligning with truth. And often that reaction starts in subtle ways: confusion, fatigue, distraction, delay, restlessness. Things that make you question what God was doing in the first place. That is one of the enemy's most effective strategies. If he can confuse you, he can slow you down. If he can distract you, he can weaken your focus. If he can discourage you, he can make you retreat on your own. And that is why this moment matters so much. Because many people feel the pressure and assume they should stop. They think, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe nothing is really changing. But that is not always true. Sometimes the pressure is there because something is changing. Sometimes the battle is there because your life is no longer spiritually passive. God is building something in you. Maybe it is endurance. Maybe it is discernment. Maybe it is boldness. Maybe it is spiritual strength you will need for what is ahead. And the enemy notices what is under construction before you do. That is why some attacks feel sudden. From your side, it feels like everything changed at once. But in the spirit, it is reaction to growth, reaction to awakening, reaction to purpose. So do not misread this season. Do not let pressure make you doubt God. Do not let tension make you abandon the process. Do not let resistance convince you to go backward. What you are feeling may be heavy, but it may also be proof that God is building something real in your life. And if the enemy has noticed it, then you need to stop seeing this battle as a sign of failure and start seeing it as a sign that something deeper has already begun. Number 3, increased pressure is not punishment, it's confirmation. At some point, the pressure becomes impossible to ignore. It feels heavier than before, more constant, more personal. And the first thing many people think is, did I do something wrong? Is God upset with me? Why does everything feel harder now? But what if the pressure you're feeling is not punishment? What if it's confirmation? Because one of the biggest misunderstandings in spiritual growth is this: people think that when they are close to God, life should feel easier. But in the Bible, we see something very different. When Joseph was chosen, his life did not get easier. It got harder. He was betrayed. He was misunderstood. He was thrown into situations he never asked for. And yet, God was still with him. That means difficulty is not always a sign of distance from God. Sometimes, it is a sign of direction. Because when God begins to position you for something greater, He allows pressure to shape you, not to break you, but to prepare you. Pressure reveals what is inside you. Pressure builds endurance. Pressure strengthens your spirit. And most importantly, pressure exposes what still needs to change. That is why this season feels so intense, because you are not the same person anymore. And God is not leaving you at the level you were at before. He is stretching you, growing you, refining you. And that process is not comfortable, but it is necessary, because what God is preparing for you requires a stronger version of you, a deeper faith, a steadier mind, a stronger spirit, and that cannot be built without pressure. So instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Start asking, what is this building in me? Because if you shift your perspective, everything changes. The pressure stops feeling like punishment and starts looking like preparation. And once you see it that way, you stop running from it. You begin to grow through it. And that's when things begin to shift again. Because pressure does not just shape you, it activates something in you. Number 4. God's love activates what was hidden inside you. There are things inside you that you don't even realize yet. Strength you haven't used. Faith you haven't fully stepped into. Authority you haven't recognized. And when God begins to move in your life, He doesn't just change your situation. He activates what was already placed inside you. That is what His love does. It awakens. It unlocks. It reveals. This is what happened with David. Before he faced Goliath, He was already fighting battles in private. Lions, bears, moments no one saw. God was building something in him long before anyone else recognized it. So when the moment came, David was ready, not because the situation was easy, but because what was inside him had already been activated. And that is what is happening in your life right now. You are being activated. That is why things feel different. That is why you feel more aware, more sensitive, more alert than before. Because something in you is waking up. And the moment that happens, the enemy reacts. Because as long as your potential stays hidden, it is not a threat, but once it becomes active, everything changes. Once you start thinking differently, once you start seeing clearly, once you start standing stronger, you are no longer easy to control. And that is what the enemy tries to stop. He doesn't just attack what you are doing, he tries to stop what you are becoming. He tries to shut down your confidence, your clarity, your growth before it fully develops. That is why this stage feels so intense, because you are in the middle of activation. You are not who you used to be, but you are not fully who you are becoming yet. And that in-between space is where the battle feels the strongest. But you need to understand this. What God has placed inside you cannot be undone by pressure. It can only be strengthened by it. Every challenge you face right now is pushing you to grow into the person you were created to be. So do not shrink back. Do not doubt the change you are feeling. Do not ignore the shift happening inside you, because this is not random. This is activation. And once something is activated, it cannot go back to being hidden again. And that leads to the next truth you need to see clearly. Number 5. Sudden attacks often follow quiet seasons with God. If you look closely at your life, you may notice a pattern. Right before things got difficult, there was a moment of peace, a moment where you felt close to God, a moment where everything felt clear, a moment where your spirit felt steady. And then suddenly, everything shifted. Pressure increased. Distractions showed up. Attacks came from places you didn't expect. And you start wondering, why now? Why right after things felt so right? But this pattern is not new. It is biblical. After Jesus was baptized, heaven opened, God spoke, affirmation came, clarity was established, and immediately after that, Jesus was led into the wilderness, not away from God, but deeper into purpose. And that is something many people misunderstand. They think the attack means something went wrong, but often, the attack comes because something went right. Because when you have a moment with God, when your spirit becomes clear, when your direction becomes stronger, you become harder to distract, harder to pull off course. And that is when the enemy tries to interrupt you, not always by destroying you, but by breaking your focus. Because if he can interrupt your momentum, he can delay your growth. That is why attacks often feel sudden. They come right after clarity, right after peace, right after you feel like you finally understand something. And if you are not careful, you will misread the timing. You will think, maybe that moment with God wasn't real. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I should go back. But no, the timing is the confirmation. The fact that resistance came right after clarity is proof that what you experienced was real. So do not let the attack erase the moment God gave you. Do not let distractions steal what was revealed to you. Do not let pressure make you forget what you felt in that quiet place. Because those quiet moments with God, they are not weak. They are where strength is formed. And when that strength begins to show, opposition follows. But the attack is not there to stop you. It is there to test if you will hold on or let go. And that leads to something even more challenging to understand. Number 6. Not everyone around you will understand the shift. As you grow, as your spirit changes, as your life begins to move in a different direction, you will start to notice something else. Not everyone around you will understand it. People who once related to you may not anymore. Conversations may feel different. Connections may feel weaker, and it can feel confusing, even painful. Because you don't hate them. You're not trying to leave them. But something has changed, and you can't go back to who you were. This is one of the hardest parts of spiritual growth, because the change inside you creates distance around you, not always physically, but spiritually. This is what we see throughout the Bible. When God calls someone higher, He often separates them first, not to isolate them permanently, but to prepare them properly. Because not every environment can support what you are becoming. Not every voice can align with where you are going. Not every relationship can grow at the same pace as you. And if you try to stay the same for the sake of comfort, you will slow down the very process God is leading you through. That is why this season can feel lonely. You are still surrounded by people, but you feel different. You think differently. You respond differently. You see things differently, and it creates a gap. But that gap is not rejection. It is realignment. God is not removing people to hurt you. He is repositioning your life to protect what He is building in you, because what is growing in you right now is too important to be constantly pulled backward. So do not panic when things feel different. Do not force yourself to stay where you have outgrown. Do not ignore the shift just to feel comfortable again, because growth always requires separation at some level, not forever, but for this season. And if you trust God in this process, you will begin to understand you are not losing people. You are being guided into the right environment for who you are becoming. And once you accept that, the loneliness starts to turn into clarity. The confusion starts to turn into peace. And you begin to see that this shift was necessary all along. And that prepares you for the final truth you need to understand. Number 7. What the enemy meant to stop you will strengthen you. At this point, you need to see this clearly. The enemy may have reacted, the pressure may have increased, the attacks may have come suddenly, but none of it has the power to stop what God is doing in your life. It can only challenge it. It can only test it. It can only try to slow it down, because what God starts, He does not abandon. The Bible says that all things work together for good for those who love God, not some things. All things. That means even what was meant to break you can be used to build you. Even what was meant to confuse you can end up strengthening your clarity. Even what was meant to push you backward can become the very thing that pushes you forward. That is how God works. He does not waste your pain. He does not ignore your struggle. He uses it. He shapes you through it. He strengthens you in places you didn't even know were weak. That is why what you are going through right now matters so much, because every challenge you face is adding something to you. Endurance, discernment, strength, awareness, things you will need for where you are going. Because the truth is, you cannot step into a greater purpose with a weaker foundation. So God allows pressure not to destroy you, but to make sure you are ready. And the enemy, even when he tries to interfere, ends up being part of that process. Because what he meant for harm, God turns into growth. That is why you cannot give up in this moment. Because if you stop now, you miss what this season is building in you. You miss the strength that is forming. You miss the version of you that is being shaped right now. And you go back to being the person you already outgrew. But if you stay, if you endure, if you trust God through this process, you will come out stronger than you were before, more focused, more grounded, more aware of who you are, and more prepared for what is ahead. Because what the enemy noticed, God is already developing, and what God is developing cannot be stopped, only completed. Conclusion. So if you feel like something is watching your life right now, don't ignore it, but don't fear it either, because what you are feeling is not random. That pressure, that tension, that shift you cannot explain. It started the moment God began moving in you. It started the moment your spirit began to wake up. It started the moment your life stopped being ordinary. And yes, the enemy noticed, but that does not mean you are in danger. It means you are in a moment of transformation, a moment where something deeper is happening, a moment where God is shaping you for something more. That is why things feel different. That is why the pressure increased. That is why the battle became real, because your life has direction now, purpose now, weight now. So do not run from this moment. Do not convince yourself that nothing is happening, because something is happening and it matters more than you think. And walk away instead of realizing they are being prepared. But now you see it differently. So stay where God is working. Stay through the pressure. Stay through the process, because what is being built in you right now is not small. And one day you will look back at this moment and realize this was the season where everything began to change.